this is George Sachs, clinical psychologist and expert in adult ADD. And today I'm here with Christine Hansen. Christine is a sleep expert. Hello, Christine.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you about my favorite topic.
Christine is a sleep expert to CEOs, executives, athletes, and high achievers who want to sleep but can't. She's also the creator of the 5-step Sleep Like a Boss process, focusing on sleep foundations, gut health, thyroid issues, nutrition, and hormones that helps people to fall and stay asleep without having to rely on sleeping pills. So I look forward to speaking with you today and learning how people with ADD, as you know, struggle with sleep, and how we can help the participants of this summit learn to sleep better and thus improve their adult ADD symptoms.
Definitely. So, I mean, sleep and ADD have been connected for a long time, and there's actually continuous research. And the tricky thing is obviously because one bounces off the other, right? So ADD makes it difficult to sleep, and not getting enough sleep can make ADD even worse or more difficult to handle in a way. So it's really this vicious circle kind of thing. But I think what I want to talk about today is a little bit how you can prepare yourself the best way possible. And also, if those things don't work, what the next step might be that are not necessarily the first thing you think of when you think of sleep issues, for example.
Okay, great. Let's dive in.
Right. So one of the things that it's not just for people with ADD, but something I really see happening a lot of the time is that people kind of leave sleep till the last minute, right? So it's kind of your day is so full, and then come nighttime, suddenly everything has to function in terms of sleep. So suddenly your mind has to be super quiet. Suddenly everything needs to shut down. And that can be very difficult. And so one thing I love to explain is that sleep is not an on and off switch. For some people, it is. You have some people who are super calm and super chill and they can sleep everywhere. But for most of us, it is a process. So you can imagine it kind of like having a car that's shifting gears back. And for some of us, that process is quicker, and others, we need to work on it a little bit more. And I find that a lot of people leave that till the end, and then it takes some time, and considering that it's quiet, that it's dark, and for the first time in your day, you're actually alone with your thoughts, that can actually make it worse in a way. So my first thing is always to tell people to actually prepare for sleep during the day, especially if you have sleep issues. And I mean, that's the people we talk about here. So a couple of things that you can do in order to do that is, first of all, you can work on your mind. And the second thing is nutrition. I find that that is also a really important piece. So I'm going to talk about those two things first. So one of the first things is that I find a lot of people, when I talk to them, they mention this famous monkey mind. It's when suddenly all these things pop up and you have this mind carousel going off. You suddenly have all these to-do lists that pop up, or you have events that happen during the day and that you manage to compartmentalize that are suddenly, flooding your brain. And so a technique that I like to use is to be aware of what is triggering during the day or what you are trying to compartmentalize. So if you want to visualize it, it's kind of whenever you have the urge to take a feeling, an idea, or just even a notion and put it into that drawer for later, be aware that that whole chest of drawers is going to be flung at you come nighttime. So one thing that I like to do is either just people becoming aware of those triggers or ideas, or if you need a little bit more help, to actually have a notebook with you and just write it down. And it doesn't need to be like a huge academic text, it's literally just taking notes and making sure that that is out of the way. And I find that if you do that, it gives you a little bit of peace. It's not having to do everything. It's not going to stress you out so much. Plus you've done something with it. You kind of had a catalyst that is managing to put it down. So your brain has processed it, and it's just avoiding that bottleneck situation of having everything coming and crashing down at you at nighttime. So that's one of the first things. The second thing, which I think helps every condition you might have, whether it's ADD or anything else, is obviously nutrition. So I'm sure you probably have a nutritionist who's going to be on here. So one thing that I only want to mention is that people who struggle with sleep often have imbalanced blood sugar levels. So what they tend to do is they go from sugar spike to sugar spike. And if you have a spike at nighttime, it's not going to be helpful. And the reason is that if you have blood sugar going up, which is because you ate something that is releasing sugar quickly into your bloodstream, you will need insulin to bring it back down. And a partner of insulin is cortisol. And cortisol is a stress hormone that is it's detrimental to sleep. It's basically interfering with your melatonin, and it's also making you feel wired. So it's not helping with sleep. So we want to avoid that. And naturally, cortisol is supposed to lower at nighttime. So if you eat something that is provoking a spike in sugar, it brings with it a rise in insulin and cortisol. And so most people go through the day, they have quite an unhealthy breakfast, even if we think that maybe cereal, traditional cereal or pastries plus coffee is our habit, but it's really giving us that push. So that would be the first spike. And what happens then is they crash. So around 10 a.m., they need a new kind of spike. So very often that's that little brownie or a little bit of chocolate or another coffee. And then you have a rise again and you crash around noon. So you have lunch and you continue throughout the day with that kind of spiky pattern. But the thing is that your body gets used to it. And so sometimes it happens that that spiky pattern continues until nighttime, which is why you suddenly have a rise without even knowing why. So my tip is to be mindful of eating foods that are more slow releasing in sugars. So for example, brown rice versus white rice, or if you need to have carbs, brown carbs versus white carbs in terms of pasta, for example. You can also just Google low glycemic foods. Those are foods that are generally categorized as being more slow releasing. And if you do have white, like refined carbs, then make sure that you combine them with a protein in order to have them release their sugar a little bit more slowly. So those are two things that I would start with throughout the day to make sure that you are prepared for sleep. Does that help?
I like that idea a lot, because a lot of my clients will, particularly the night owls will start doing things around 10, 10:30, 11, and then 11:30, 12, even later, they're realizing I have to get into bed. And so they'll just kind of stop it and jump into bed without the physical and mental prep for that. So I like how you're backing this up. I usually tell them to back it up around an hour and a half to get ready for bed by setting an alarm at 10:30 that reminds you just to wind down.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is, literally 18 hours or 12 hours ahead, start thinking about that. And the journaling or writing down any kind of unhelpful thoughts or stressful thoughts seems really simple and powerful for that, because it's so true. They do come out in our sleep. And then I also coach about the impact of sugar. And we do have a woman talking about sugar and blood sugar levels. So I'm happy to hear that you're also seeing that the value of a healthy diet and prepping for sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a simple thing, but we just neglect it. And sometimes we just don't know. So another thing that you can actually do is track what you eat. I find a lot of my clients have no idea how much or when they actually eat. And when they write it down, they actually notice that they don't eat until 11. And then they binge, or that they eat too little, actually, so that happens too. Even though they might not lose weight because their body is in stress, they actually don't feed it enough. So that's also something that you can easily do. And I also tell my clients to, if they are prone to leave it till last minute to get ready for bed, to set an alarm for sure. It's an easy practice, but I really find it helps. And then another thing that you can do is I do like a gratitude journal, just because anything that's positive releases serotonin in your brain, and that helps in turn to convert into melatonin and can help sleep too. So the only thing that I usually do tell my clients is to separate their gratitude journal from their worry journal, because sometimes you write things down that have solved themselves, or you don't even think about them anymore at nighttime or come evening. So you don't necessarily want to be remembered of them, or reminded of them. So having a separate journal for that is actually pretty cool. And then just writing down 3 things, and it doesn't have to be world changing. It could literally be, I've got the last parking space, or they still had my favorite muffin in the canteen. Small things are absolutely valid as well.
Okay, so what can an adult with ADD do once they get into bed and they've prepped for it, relaxing, not
Yeah.
working on new projects, but they're actually in bed now. They've written in their gratitude journal, and they're still struggling to get to sleep.
Mm-hmm. So there's 2 things to this, and you said something really interesting, which was about the night owls. So one thing, if you don't have, let's say, if you know that, let's talk very quickly about the biological clock, which is also called the circadian rhythm. And it's basically an internal clock that tells us when it's getting light, when it's time to get up and when to be active, and when it's time to go to sleep. And so it regulates certain hormones that give us sleep pressure, and also regulates our hunger. And that circadian rhythm is pretty much the same for most people. But if you're someone who has, for example, a delayed circadian rhythm, it might mean that your process is triggered 2 to 3 hours later than other people. So for most of us, we're naturally getting tired a lot earlier than we actually think. For most of us, it's around 9, 10, actually, if we listen to our body. It's just that we're too busy. So we skip it, basically. And if you actually, those people who have a delayed circadian rhythm, it will be a few hours later. So for them, ideally, they would go to bed around midnight, 2 or 3 a.m. even, and they would sleep in a lot longer. And sometimes when I talk to entrepreneurs, for example, and if they don't have a social schedule, meaning that they don't necessarily need to get up for kids or anything like that, then I tell them to actually try and live according to that. And it's miraculous, because their zones of geniuses are when they are naturally awake. So it's not always possible, unfortunately, with social hours and so forth. But if you're not constricted to that, then I'd actually argue to be a little bit unsocial, but being more healthy in terms of listening to your body. The other thing is that you talked about or touched upon is when you are in bed. And one of the biggest mistakes I find that people do is that they notice, and most people know from the first second whether they can sleep or not, they stay in bed. And that can actually backfire, because as I said before, this is quiet. You'll start to get super annoyed, which is not a good feeling to have. You start to resent sleep. It's this easy thing. It's not coming. So it's creating all kinds of frustration. And the truth is, when sleep has gone, it's gone. Like, sleep has left the building. It's not going to come back more quickly just because you're lying there cursing it in silence. So what I usually tell my clients is then to get up again out of bed and make sure that you're not hitting your eyes with bright light. So keep lights low. Try even maybe to have light bulbs in your bedroom that are more on the orangey side rather than blue or LED lights, because they are prone to interfere with melatonin buildup. And you can even also reach for blue light blocking glasses, for example, and obviously avoid screens and so forth. So going out and watching Netflix is not necessarily the best way to getting your sleep back. I would really argue to do something that keeps you busy, that doesn't necessarily passion you in terms of that you get all lit up by a new idea, but it could be a great time to fold laundry, for example, or do something that requires
write in your worry journal.
Write in your worry journal. Read a book that is interesting, but maybe not like the latest romance novel where you get totally engrossed into the story. Maybe a nonfiction book, something that needs your brain power, but that isn't getting all of your focus. And you will know when sleep is back. Like, really imagine it like a person. It will basically tip you on the shoulder, and you will start to feel eyelids getting heavy. You will start yawning, and then you can have a second try, and a lot of people are worried about their partners. They're like, I can't get up, my partner will wake up. And a lot of the time that's unwarranted for. So at least try it, and don't worry too much about it. A lot of the time your partner won't notice. So that's just giving you permission to actually try this.
And one of the things that I do, because I struggle like many adults with ADD with sleep, is I've tried of course I have the sound machine and the blackout shades, but recently I've tried a couple things that seem to work. One is this weighted blanket. And I bought a few of them, but I didn't realize they're very small. And I'm 6 feet tall, so the blanket, but I did find one that was larger and heavier. And it really does, in the chillier times, it really does seem to calm me down. Have you had that experience with the weighted blanket?
I find it's either or. If I have people who tend to be panicky, it can cause anxiety. But for others, it's exactly what they needed. So it might be an idea to find someone who has one and try it out before you go in and purchase it, but it can definitely help for sure. Another thing that I find that helps is listening to podcasts, listening to sleep stories. You can find those on an app that's called Calm, for example. There's also guided meditations on there if that's your thing. There are exercises for deep breathing, which basically means that you focus your breath on your belly, and that gives a symptom or a signal to your brain that you are actually quiet and that you're calming down. So you can kind of trick your brain into thinking that it's all good and calm already. And I would really suggest looking into that as well. It might work for some people, not necessarily for everyone. And then another thing, if people aren't spiritual, for example, and they're like, oh, meditation doesn't work for me because of my religion or my beliefs, then there's meditations that are based more on they have a different kind of language, and they're called iRest. So like iPhone, it's called iRest. And I really like them. They were developed for, I think, for soldiers who suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. And they are still used for all kinds of people who are more prone to anxiety or just have issues calming down their mind. And it's like a body scan. It's on a very neutral language, and I find it can really help too.
Okay, well, thank you very much. This has been very helpful. And hopefully the participants also got something from it. So I want to thank you, Christine, for joining us today, and hopefully we connect another time.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.